Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Uvlalurdak in my native tongue. I have worked in the Waikiki Delta quite a bit, working on the Oscarville Tribal Adaptation Plan, as well as the relocation of Newtok. And so the one thing that I am very pleased to continually see when I go into the Waikiki Delta is the people and the language and the preservation and protection of those lands. Um, and as a land acknowledgement, we want to recognize all our ancestors. I currently am residing in Palmer, Alaska, where I acknowledge the land of the Deniaina people that have lived here for thousands of years. I would like you to also take a moment to think about where you're at and to acknowledge that land and those ancestors, and just recognize that they were inhabitants of the land we walk on and live on for thousands and thousands of years. And they were the stewards of the land. They are why we are here today. So let's just take a minute to think about our ancestors and to acknowledge them and to respect where we are in this place and time. I'm really excited to see this project, and thank you, Heather, for inviting me. Subsistence is I'm a gatherer, so obviously subsistence and food are a big part of my life. So it's kind of funny I'm on this panel, but I also want to acknowledge that um, in this session, I want you to really think about the connection to all the other pieces that are part of your strategic planning. Subsistence and our lifestyle are key to the existence of all our people. So we need to recognize that and we need to honor it. So how does this fit into housing? Well, if we don't have adequate food storage and we don't have adequate storage for all our supplies for our many seasons, we don't just have 4 seasons, we have food seasons, I call them. And if we don't acknowledge that that's a piece of housing, we'll never get the housing piece right. If we don't acknowledge that that's a piece of economic development, which it is now, just a hidden economy, if we have communities like Oscarville that have 80% of their food security is off the land, air, and sea, we have to acknowledge that that is a economic piece of their culture, of their community, and how does that fit in? So as you think about this and we work through these questions, I want you to challenge yourself to go beyond just the simple question through a Western lens. I want you to look at it through an Indigenous lens and to really dive deeper. Um, so Heather's going to control everything. So I feel like I'm talking to a computer, to a screen, but please interrupt me, raise your hand, or if you're calling in, please just jump in and say you have something to say, and we'll give you that space. So this really is about conversation, and this is about listening and learning. And I caught the tail end of the youth keynote, and I have to say thank you um, for for stepping up. I know that's a hard role when you're young, but you are the future leaders of all of our communities. So the involvement of youth and those future leaders is vital to the next generation understanding. In indigenous cultures, we have to remember past, present, future. Where have we come from? And how did we get to today? But how are we strategically planning it for the future? And that piece of it, the strategic planning piece, I say that our people for thousands of years were master planners. Why? Because they planned for seasonal relocation. Um, we have the skill set in our DNA to prepare for the future. So we just have to remember that. And sometimes we need to be like shaken awake in order to do that. So the action plan tasks here are listed. And I think probably, Heather, I think it'd be nice to just hear from everyone before we dive in and just see. I heard a couple people say they had something to share. That sharing may shift or add to this task list. So I really would like to hear from anyone who has anything to say prior to diving into this list here. All right, she's getting to the action plan. Here we go. We'll have room for conversation throughout this session, as well as at the end of the session. But really, if you have anything that you think needs to be added, if you've attended before and you've already reviewed all the documents, then go ahead and feel free to participate right now and communicate. Heather, do you remember who said they had something to share? Do you have that noted?
I believe it was George Anderson wanted to share something.
I think Stephen Alexi, somebody calling in said that they had something to share.
Yeah, it was me, Stephen Alexi. I just wanted, I heard Chignik and I was happy they're part of the group. As you guys all know, we've been hit hardest this year with chums. Most people that were hit hardest is the Yukon people. And, I've been doing my little research all summer and watching Area M commercial fishermen, taking nearly 2.2 million chums. And needless to say, we're suffering in the river where, chum is a big part of our elders' diet here because it's easier on their bodies and stomach and makes them ail less compared to these other salmon resources that we gather. We were fortunate to have gathered enough reds this year, despite having low chum return. And I just wanted to bring that up, and I got happy when Chignik was part of the discussions, as we're neighbors. For many, many years, I believe we've been looking local to the escapement needs without looking at the bigger picture where these salmon that return to the ocean to grow, kings take 6 to 7 years to grow out there, but chums, I believe, were every 4 years, if I'm not mistaken. And, we barely look at the broader picture here. I know the Yukon people are hurting this year, and Donald Go was part of a group where we sent some fish to donate to those communities. And looking at a bigger picture, each family probably got 1 or 2 fish. That's just enough for 1 day of consumption. So I just wanted that noted and put in black and white, so we can revisit it and try to get some kind of conservation. I know locally in the Kuskokwim, we've been doing our efforts for nearly 10 years, and it's going to take longer for this conservation, to start rebounding. And I voiced my opinion to the governor of the state of Alaska, also Fish and Game Commissioner, and I believe if all the tribes within our region, not just the YK Delta region, those our neighbors up north, which a lot of chums return to, get together and become one voice, I think we'll be able to move, the minds of those people working, supposedly for the state of Alaska residents. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I know that was going to be a big topic today. That was one of the reasons I invited George, because I think he has a story innovation and response that, we've never had to do before. Um, there are many factors. I don't know that there's one factor, but certainly our changing climate and is going to change our food resources. And that is something we have to be really aware of. Just like you said, as Indigenous people, if the salmon don't come to you, eventually they're not going to come to us. And so we have to look at it through that universal lens and make sure that we are all stewards of this beautiful place. Was there anyone else that wanted to share? And Heather, I just want to be cognizant of time. I wanted to do this up front because I really think that it plants the seeds for conversation throughout. Would you like George to just share how they responded to this? I would call it a disaster in our eyes. Or would you like us to wait?
I think it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. And I just, George, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I really think that this is an important conversation that we all need to think about as we move through this, because subsistence isn't one species. It is, it's our lifeline. It's what makes us who we are. And that to me is vitally important, and that we recognize that we all are intertwined through that thread, that sinew that binds us. So George, if you want to share a little bit of how, what your thoughts are on that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, Jackie, thank you. Thank you for that. And I want to respond to what Steve said there too. Just a little background before I get into how we respond to gaps in our food security. 25 years ago, when I started attending the fish board meetings that Steve was alluding to, I would find myself on breaks talking to people from the YK Delta, talking about our similarities in subsistence and the lack of acknowledgement of traditional elder knowledge, and their frustrations. And we were entering into fish battles. At that time, we weren't dealing with what the Yukon was dealing with. Well, fast forward 20 some years, and we are the Yukon. Our voice is not being recognized equally, and it's frustrating. So yeah, you have to find innovative ways to reach out to the policymakers, and we'll probably talk about that a little later on. But starting in 2018, we started having our full run failures. Ours happens to be sockeye and Chinook, but like Jackie said, it's a gap in your food security. So how we dealt with it, we reached out to like BBNC and BBNA, our regional organizations, and they had been involved with some people down in Southeast Alaska who are trying to assist tribes in closing or narrowing these food security gaps that exist. And they're very culturally sensitive to how, long story short, we did not subsist because we wanted the fish to escape to the streams for future generations, not based on the numbers that these policymakers told us what was adequate, but what our elders said was adequate for our streams. So we really acknowledge the traditional knowledge in our area. And so anyhow, we wouldn't subsist on our own fish, but these other folks filled that gap by donating, I think it was 45,000 pounds of Bristol Bay sockeye. They're actually robust right now. They're doing well, and something our people in our area are really big on sharing. And it was really nice for them to share to us. The product that they gave us was in the round, so our people could, process the fish how they wanted it. We don't know how to go into a store and buy a filleted fish. When we look for things, it's either whole fish or a quarter of a moose, or we know what it looks like hanging in our smokehouse. We don't know what it looks like at Costco, where you shop with your eyes. So, anyways, yeah, we dispersed that salmon out to countless members, 5 communities, and also our folks that reside in the South Central region. We were able to disperse out of BBNC's parking lot in Anchorage here. And anyways, Jackie, I know I can ramble on for hours. And did I get around to your question?
Yeah, thanks, George. Really, and what this is a story of resilience. We're going to have to adapt the way we respond. And this, to me, the issues that Stephen was talking about and the response that George is talking about is exactly it. We have elders that reside in Anchorage, either for medical or whatever, and they were able to reach those folks as well. And so I really think this sets the tone for the conversation moving forward. And the importance is to really think on how are we going to adapt as our food resources and our subsistence lifestyle is starting to shift. We're seeing changes that we haven't seen before, and how are we going to adapt to that? So I'll leave that there. I'm going to ask Clarence had his hand up. If you want to share, and then we'll get on with the questions.
Hi, good morning, Brianna. What I'm going to share is my personal opinion. Clarence Daniel, personal opinion, not associated with AVCP, just from me. I just wanted to put that out front before I say something. And it's around like the data of the numbers and everything, not just for fish, but birds and everything. There's all the regulations for subsistence is based on data, numbers, returning. All the time we base data on returning numbers, it's going to make the end user regulate it further. So we need to think outside the box and harness, if we want to impose stricter regulations and targets on things outside of the region, we really need to look at the data we're collecting, and the data we're collecting should be what is being the amount of resource that our regions produce. So we need to harness the how much birds are hatched, how much geese, ducks, swans, and everything. There's lots that are, a lot of the resource is reproduced here. Same thing with the fish, lots of fish. We do escapement and everything so that fish spawn and everything, but we never harness the data to calculate what we're producing. If we can think outside the box, and I know people are going to, especially scientists, biologists are going to say that's impossible to do. No, it's not impossible to do. Look at what the biologists did to correlate test fishery to escapement. They tied it together. We can do this to tie what we produce with the error terms and everything of other effects to really determine the mass of what's being produced here. Then, only then can we impose stricter targets on outside of the region. And that's, my personal opinion.
Take you, Clarence, for that. I think this does kind of set the tone. And really what Clarence is saying is Western data collecting and monitoring only goes so far. What we have to do is change that and make it a local monitoring and have our voices heard so that that intertwined conversation creates different outcomes. So that disconnect is apparent all over the state. There are a lot of folks that are starting to look at Indigenous knowledge and the wisdom of local observation and value it, because you can only do so much from a Western modeling perspective. So is there anyone else that wants to share, or are we ready to hop in? Okay, looks like we're ready, Heather. And I don't know if Heather, if you want to do a quick overview, and then we could dive into each action item.
Sure. Do you want me to walk through, or do you?
I could walk through it if you want. That's fine. You're controlling it. I just can't move it.
Okay.
I feel like my hands are tied behind my back and I'm just reading the screen, but the action plan task, and then who the lead partners were, the progress. This is where we're at. We're going to try to do a progress update and any potential funding resources, and then what the next steps are. So there's quite a few things to go over. And they're all listed here. The first one being including youth on the seat for subsistence, which I think is ABCP. I think the keynote speakers were obviously a great example of creating that space for youth. And is there someone at ABCP that wants to do a progress update for this first one? I don't know if I'm putting people on the spot or if the right person's not here. I don't. Clarence, you're pretty involved in this. Could you provide any progress or updates on how youth have been included into the Subsistence CEDS working group?
I don't think I was part of this working group last year, so I wasn't sure who was going to take the lead on this particular one, but
Okay.
I think it's a matter of just bringing it up at the next CEDS committee meeting and adding, proposing to add a youth to the CEDS committee.
Okay.
I think we did invite Randall, Jaden, and Paul to join this group right here. If they wanted to, or if they could, to provide input. And I think that's what I have as an update.
Okay. I see we also have Jennifer and Paige. Do either one of you have any updates?
Hi, this is Jennifer. Sorry, I double muted here. I had to, I was not able to engage much at all, unfortunately, with the last work session that we had for the CEDS. I got pulled into some administrative meetings, and so missed, I think, the majority of the conversation, and I did not recall this particular item, but I think it could be as simple as Clarence suggested, bringing it up at the the next steering committee, and yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, thanks. No, that's helpful. And You know, that's the other thing is, especially with subsistence and including our youth. I mean, I'm a busy person as well. Um, you know, we have to think about prioritizing things so that there's a ripple effect. If our youth get the answers and then for some reason something happens and they replace us, they have the knowledge or at least the connection and the network to participate if we're unavailable. So for Randall, Jaden, and Paul, kudos to you. And I would encourage you to step into these roles as you're invited. And if you're not invited and there's something that you're really interested in, to really just step outside of your comfort zone and learn more about it so you could participate. Is there anyone else that wants to input on this particular topic? Otherwise, we'll move down.
Oh, this is Clarence. One other thing that we did do at the last, at the last CEDS committee meeting when we were planning this work session is the CEDS committee did commit to wanting a youth keynote, and that's why we saw the the people that we saw doing the keynote.
Yeah, so I would say that that is progress. That's the progress update, is that you did make it happen, and then you invited them to this working group. So so I think that that is a great start. The next action task is participating in resource management meetings, and because I'm not familiar with the working group, I saw there was a roll call. I am not familiar with who would provide these updates normally in this particular setting. So because I'm unfamiliar with it, Heather, if you want to jump in and call on anyone, you're welcome to. Or if there's somebody in this conversation that has participated in the past, I encourage you, even if you don't have an update, to just provide maybe past progress that may have happened that should be noted in this work session. So is there anyone that has worked on this? I would say, is there maybe somebody from Chalista? I don't see Melissa on the call today.
This is Jennifer again from ABCP. I think for the tasks outlined here in item B, those are kind of sort of our regularly scheduled program, I guess, at ABCP within the Natural Resources Program. We regularly interact with the RAC and North Pacific Fishery Management Council meetings. And then in season, both on the Yukon and the Kuskokwim for fisheries, observations and management updates. But again, regarding the youth seat, I'm not sure if there's been any, action or efforts yet to try and get more youth engaged. All of these, at least on the federal side, the RACs and the North Pacific Council, every seat is, it's either, specified in statute or by Congress, or has to follow FACA and have, they have specific representation, tied to seats. And so I don't know what the mechanism would be to add, formal youth seats on these. But I think, reading down on the list, it would definitely easily be up to, tribes and local sort of advisory bodies and committees to maybe invite, regular participation as a start to, get more youth in the game. We don't actively engage with, corporation meetings and things like that, so I couldn't speak to those, but some of the other items listed there, that's kind of our regular sort of advocacy routine at ABCP.
Okay, I wonder if is there someone on the working group committee, steering committee that could potentially give an overview? I know, you know, as youth start participating in this, sometimes it can be very overwhelming, especially when you get into
Yeah,
a
Jackie.
Western setting. And go ahead.
Yeah, this is Mike Williams, calling from Akiak. Yeah, on these participating in resource management meetings has been ongoing. You know, we organized 33 tribes to form the Kuskokwim River Intertribal Fish Commission, and it has been a very good process to get have all the villages be engaged in helping manage our fisheries on the Kuskokwim River, and also we worked with the Yukon River Intertribal Fish Commission, and at about the same time, we good thing that we came up with an agreement with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with the MOU in doing a formal agreement to help manage our fisheries on the Kuskokwim River, and it has because of the low returns of Chinook and you know, if there are other species that are of concern that we you know have the river to because of the conservation concerns of our fisheries. In terms of locally here in Akiak, we have had focus groups involving the students here in the community in discussing the current status, the data on Chinook and all the species, and what their recommendation is along with the elders. And we had those regular focus groups to come up with recommendations, and it has been wonderful outside of the outside of this, and I just really appreciate all of the youth that came up with
Heather, are you getting that slow feedback as well, or am I just getting it?
No, I'm getting it as well. I'm sorry. The audio is coming in and out. Or Mike.
this morning.
Mike,
Yes.
we're not able to hear
With
you.
their doing a lot of things.
Oh, there we go. Maybe, Mike, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your internet is really unstable, so we can't get the audio. Could you maybe turn off your video while you finish? Sometimes that helps with the audio. There we go. Nope, did I lose you? Mike, are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yes,
Oh.
I'll call in. How's my the internet Wi-Fi is pretty bad here in Akiak, but we're working on. We're going to have broadband pretty soon, so that'll be solved. But anyway, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, this is an ongoing, you know, we have Kuskokwim River Management Working Group advising the management on the state side on the Kuskokwim River. and also the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service when the river is federalized, then the customs moves the river from the mouth to Antioch. But that's and having done focus groups with the youth here locally in Akiak has been, we have to and during the summer when we deal with openers and etc. And the youth are involved in putting up fish. And also we have that fisheries program that
We're losing you again, Mike.
we have going along with
I can't hear Mike. Is anybody else having that issue as well?
Yes,
I just sent it.
he's breaking up quite a bit.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure it's not me on my end. Mike, we can't hear the audio, but I think this is all really wonderful stuff. I think some of this could carry over to the who and what for planning, because basically what they have done is they encouraged community organizations and tribes to participate in forming and focus groups with elders and youth. And that to me is vital. We have to take responsibility for our own communities. And this is a great example of how they were able to do that. So I think that that's great. And Mike, did you want to stay off camera and just unmute and see if we could, and you could close up?
yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Yeah, I think that my face is I know that you know, maybe the audio doesn't want to receive my ugly face, but anyway, it's really really good to have these discussions about management locally here, and also outside, out in the bay, in the high seas, and the issue of climate change, and it's affecting our food security pretty bad here on the Kuskokwim. You know, we're not meeting our needs to whatever we used to, and but we're including all of the youth here and the elders yearly at the local level, and I think it's I'm very impressed with the young people that are keynote speakers this morning, and I'm very impressed. And we need more of them. And I think the subsistence management in the future is in good hands out here in Western Alaska and the Kuskokwim River and the Yukon rivers. I know that the fish are in trouble in the Yukon, and we need to help each other, and we appreciate.
Hey, Mike, we're losing you again. I don't know if you wanna, if you want us to take
and
notes.
others donating sustenance. At 1 year, we had
I don't know if Mike, we keep losing you. I don't know if you want to add things to the chat so that Heather could capture it, because we're not
Yeah.
hearing some of the
I'll,
things you
I'll,
were
I'll,
saying.
I'll dial in by phone.
Okay, all right. We do have a
Yes,
couple.
I'll connect my phone.
Okay, awesome. So we'll look for that number, Heather. Mike's going to try to call in by phone. And Clarence put something in the chat. Could we bring the youth seat on these boards to AFN as an objective for AFN to oversee, since they have contacts within all the villages? That's a good idea. Certainly you could put that with the comment about taking responsibility, having each, there you go, you got it in there. And then we have George, you have your hand up?
Yes, Jackie, I just had a comment while we're on this section specifically, and it has to do with the youth involvement. And, we recognize that, when you don't have fish, it's such part of our culture that the youth start to feel uneasy, and it's like you're losing part of your identity. And we haven't even begun to talk about the long-term effects of not having fish, in your life. But anyways, while we're on the subject of meeting preparation, and I remember when I was younger, coming from the village, heading into a room of 200 or 300 people to speak is very intimidating. So what recently we've done is organized mock, like a board of fish meeting, where you have it in your own community, or when we can gather, and just take an agenda from a past meeting and walk the youth and the elders through a meeting, and say this is what to expect during this part of the meeting, and let them know it's okay to talk about yourself and how it's affecting you. So it is really nice to be able to have that working relationship with the elders, talk about when they go to these meetings, and then the youth learning from them. I think it creates a space where when they are able to attend a meeting, it's not as intimidating. So I just wanted to add mock meetings when they're out of cycle to kind of prepare our youth for this, because you only have 3 minutes usually, or 2 minutes sometimes, to talk about your life. So, okay, thank you.
Right. Thanks, George. And that's so true in a Western meeting setting, in a village setting, when they're in our space, if an elder speaks and talks story for a half an hour, we allow that space. But in a Western setting, when they have Robert's rules, or they're following a strict structure, that 2 minutes goes really fast. You might just get to your introduction and then you're done. So you don't even get your testimony in, right? So I think that's a great idea to create mock meetings and even time it. I mean, I think this is something that even organizations, we could do better. All of us that are on boards, we could go into the schools and utilize our organization influence and model meetings and create mentorships for those next generation of leaders. All right, so let's see. Lots of good information. We have lots to do. Anyone else want to input on this particular? This is about the meetings, the fisheries and the management meetings. I think we have some great next steps there. Okay, well, the next one is create a video guide covering topics such as running to be on a council. I think some of this actually could kind of replicate what was just said, which is really wonderful. Partnering with organizations like KYUK is wonderful. Katie's a wonderful, personable person. She's great at her job. I think that's a great way to reach out. The other thing is connecting organizations. Create a video guide. You could use a high school yearbook class, or something like that, to create local videos. We live in a world of phones, and something that is really easy to do is to record yourself on TikTok and tell your story. I think there are apps and things that kids use these days that are tools that we haven't recognized as adults and elders sometimes. But I think that bringing that to a council is an interesting concept, and connecting those dots. All right. Where are you going, Heather? I can't read my next line.
We had somebody join us, so I just wanted to.
Oh, okay. Okay, how are we doing on time? We've been at it for an hour. I don't know what your schedule is because it's up higher. Are we going to just move through this first section and then we'll take a little break, or are we going to just push through?
So we've got this scheduled to go for 1 more hour.
Okay.
And then take a break for lunch, and then in the afternoon the other groups will meet. So should make the best of our time.
Okay. All right, so we'll just, is there anyone that wants to input on this video guide? I think there you could add not only do local videos with high school classes, but utilize phone apps in your council meetings. Sometimes youth aren't invited into those meetings. If it's just a general council meeting, or there's a discussion on fisheries, certainly you could invite the youth in and you could have them even record it for you and then share that back. But does anyone else have any other input on this particular topic? Okay. Does anyone have any examples of doing this? Has anyone done it? Oh, wait, hold on. We have something from Clarence. LKSD has a ready program for tribal management certification, adding Robert's rules and sessions like, so you want to be on your tribal council, what do you do next? Oh, that's great. So you could add that as a resource. LKSD is called Ready, all caps, program for tribal management.
And that doesn't include the Roberts rules, and so you want to be on your tribal council things, but those are things that could be added to it to capture that.
I think that's a great idea, not only for youth, but for anyone wanting to run for their village corporation board or their tribal council or their city council. Those are things that even if you took a Robert's Rules class in high school, 30 years later or 40 years later, you're running for the board, things have changed, and maybe the rules aren't so rigid anymore. And I always challenge that Robert Rules is a very Western perspective to running a meeting. I wonder how our ancestors did it. So the next topic is document the opportunities offered by existing internship and youth leadership programs. And do we have anyone from ONC here? All right, Mike, were you able to call in? I don't think so. Okay.
We do have somebody, I think, from Yukon River, Yurfa. I thought. Maybe not.
Okay. And do you have anyone from CBRF? I didn't see anyone there. So there was no updates on this section.
We maybe we should just bring this up at next meeting.
Okay, perfect. And the next one is Lower River, Upper River Youth Exchange, so that future users of the resource will understand why we need to conserve and have escapement for the Upper River use. You know, this goes back to sharing our story, so that our youth have the tools to create and lead in the future. It goes back to that past, present, future. And if they don't know why, they can't make decisions based on ancestral history or that knowledge. And I think this kind of loops all the way back up to the very beginning of the conversation where Stephen said that, you know, we need to partner with other groups so that we understand that perspective. And I think somebody else brought up the modeling and when they're doing the counts, we have to understand the full salmon cycle if we're going to understand what's happening to our river fish versus our from the ocean. And so what is that salmon story? And how do we preserve that? Has anyone worked on this Lower River, Upper River Youth Exchange? And it's interesting because I'm a coastal person, so I'm not a river person. And Kotzebue Sound has its own unique fisheries. And so for me, that exchange of knowledge when I sit with an elder from the Upper Kobuk is completely different than my perspective because she's looking at it through a different lens. Clarence?
Yeah, I was going to comment on, I think it's item D, might be item D, yeah, that one. So, you know, I don't see anyone from U.S. Fish and Wildlife on the call here, but, you know, I did have some emails back and forth with Brian Daniels, who works at U.S. Fish and Wildlife, when we were gathering information about our keynote speakers. And you know what Brian told me was hiring, this is what he wrote in an email to me: hiring of local technicians interested in biology has been a priority of the waterfowl program for a handful of years. Our primary method of hire for local student technicians is via the ANSEP program and have had good success. We highly encourage those interested to join ANSEP or contact the refuge and let us know how you are interested in working on our field crews. And those are like the intern opportunities at U.S. Fish and Wildlife here in Bethel.
Thank you, Clarence. I think that's great. You know, networking is vital. And Alaska is a small state. When you work in different sectors, you realize just how many people you know. And but connecting that our knowledge to the youth is our responsibility. So I think we have to remember that as well. Sometimes we get so busy in our everyday life that we forget that connection. All right. Was there anything else anyone else wanted to add to that? And I think on the Lower River and Upper River Youth, we had no update either, Heather. So if you want to just note that. All right. So this next one's interesting because I invited George because I wanted some outside perspective and how we all interconnect. George is on my planning committee for climate change and resilience track for the upcoming ATCAM conference. And that really is like as a whole state of Indigenous people who love salmon, we have to all protect our fisheries. So this is a good topic. Create an exchange between Yukon and Kuskokwim River programs. Do we have any updates or any references to programs that have been created. I know COVID has created a lot of disconnect, but it really is interesting how many connects it has. It changed the platform for people who couldn't attend in person to these meetings, could hop on a Zoom call and attend. So I've attended meetings that I never could have attended before COVID. So there's that opportunity to connect. So do we have any connections, any exchanges between the Yukon and Kuskokwim River programs?
I thought that I heard Mike Williams talk about this, but his connection was breaking up.
And he just put in the chat that he does not have, his phone is really bad as well. So he's not, so he's been chatting. I told him to put whatever he wanted us to share into the chat. So Mike, if you could hear us, put into the chat if you have any comments on any of these.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Hi, thanks for letting me join. I just wanted to talk a little bit. So I work for the Kuskokwim Corporation, TKC, and also I am the vice chair of the Kuskokwim River Intertribal Fish Commission, which Mike is the chair of. So we have been working on not necessarily an exchange, but a lot of collaborative work between our river on the Kuskokwim and the Yukon Intertribal Fish Commission, and also some of that loops in Norton Sound. I think Jennifer with AVCP has been involved in some of that three-way collaborative effort, especially around this last round of the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council meeting. So there are plans and ideas to continue this collaboration and just share our stories and our knowledge and our meeting processes between the Yukon and Kuskokwim. I don't know if there are like solid concrete plans for that laid out, but it is, at least an ongoing discussion. So I just thought I'd share that.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Yeah, that's exactly the type of update. So this collaboration, oh, there you go. Mike is responding, and George would like to join in as well. I really think that this opportunity to collaborate amongst one another will create a clear picture. That really is, we have the opportunity that our ancestors didn't have. We have the technology and the resources now that they didn't have to ask these questions. So I think that's wonderful. Are you capturing everything in the chat, Heather?
I am monitoring the chat.
Okay, so George has listed his organization link, and Mike has posted that Jonathan will, they both work closely together, and thanks so much. He has both audio and visual problems due to internet. And then for those, I'm reading the chat for those who are on the phone who can't read the chat. George Anderson wrote, I would like to attend any upcoming exchange meetings, as I believe we have a lot in common with our issues. And then he listed his g.anderson@chignikcoalition.org is his contact. Jennifer Hooper says the salmon crisis has really been a catalyst for building partnerships and collaboration between the two river systems, starting with the most recent salmon bycatch efforts at the last NPF, the Pacific Management meeting. And Jennifer, do you want to highlight anything else on that? I don't know if she's having issues as well. Oh, there you go.
Sorry, I have to remember to unmute two devices here. Well, I think Jonathan really explained it really well, how it sort of coined the Arctic Yukon Kuskokwim in state management and other arenas. But those, our three regions have been experiencing salmon disasters and salmon crashes for going on 30 years. And I think this last round at the North Pacific Council really is one of the biggest pushes I've seen, in the last 20 years that I've been engaging with the council. Bringing local Indigenous perspectives and rights to that table. And I think it's just kind of the beginning of collaboration, between those two systems, and then Norton Sound as our sort of our AYK regional partners. So I see nothing but more of that happening moving forward.
Okay. Yeah, and then Mike just put in the chat that we are partnering with Norton Sound, Yukon, and Kuskokwim to deal with the lack of returns. We are recommending an MSA to include 2 tribal seats on that council, so the North Pacific Fisheries Council. So certainly that would be, I would just even add that to the next steps, is to make sure that that is not just a recommendation, but that it's a follow-up. Sometimes we put ideas into this progress updates and recommendations, but we never follow up. And I think what you just said, Jennifer, is that, our voices and our perspective should be valued at those tables. And we need to make sure that we, push the chair out and sit down. And I think that is, again, I heard someone say to me a couple of weeks ago on a panel, it's our responsibility to step into those roles, but are we ready? And, I think our youth are telling us they're ready. So I think that we could be good mentors and examples for that. Okay, so anything else for the exchange between the river programs? I think we went beyond just 2 rivers. We went into 3 rivers, and I think that's great. I mean, pretty soon we'll just be talking about salmon and all the different species. It won't be about waterways, because we'll be fighting for every single salmon. All right, moving on. Oh, go ahead.
This is Clarence. Jennifer could probably speak more eloquently on this, but I was a participant with one of Jennifer's committees here at AVCP for the ICC co-management action plan or action plan.
Mm-hmm.
And ICC is using that to try to develop a co-management action plan among North Slope, Kotzebue area, Bering Straits, Cusco, YK area. So I think Jennifer could speak more to that, but it's something that's in the works.
Yeah, I think that just highlights, Clarence, that eventually we as Indigenous people will have to step up and support each other in order to not only create that clear picture, but to protect our food resources. There is one other comment from Mike in the chat. I'm going to read. He said, "In zero catch in the Bering Sea pollock fishery, it is necessary to do it because we are experiencing lack of food security." And food security is a topic that is very different when you're looking through a Western lens versus an Indigenous lens. And I say that because subsistence is our life. That's our way of life. And I just encourage everyone, if you want to participate in some of those conversations, look for conferences that have those food resilience and food security tracks. We have a couple food resilience tracks on our upcoming conference, and I'll put the link in the chat. But look for those types of, and if you have them, share them with your network. If you hear these conversations being had, but maybe you're not, it's not your area of expertise, share it with somebody. I know Clarence is a great resource to share information. I used to love working with Brent and Clarence and everyone over there at ABCP because they were so good at sharing information. All right, so our next one, Heather, we're gonna scoot down. Develop a career pathway for subsistence and natural resource management. I think there are some great examples out there. Do we have anyone that wants to speak on this topic for an update? ANSEP is one. APU also trying to become a tribal college is incorporating lots of new topics and new areas to study in. And one that is a coordination office for the Navigating the New Arctic is a good resource. And the program manager is James Tempty for that. But there are some programs that are out there that are shifting how we look at career pathways for subsistence and natural resource management. UAF has a fisheries management program going on as well. And that's from Mike.
I think the opening this morning speaks loud to this, type of thing we're looking for. So, I was glad to see these young gentlemen, one getting a master's, the other one nearly graduating. Back in my day, we didn't have these kind of stepping stones. So I'm really proud of these young gentlemen taking on, much needed, especially in this time of need where we're, starting to see the effects of the changing climate and the trawlers of the ocean damaging the ecosystem for where salmon go rear and grow.
Thank you. Is that Stephen? Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Stephen.
Yes.
I totally agree. It's no different than what happened when the international whaling, and they depleted the whales. We're looking at the same type of thing happening from over harvesting our fisheries. So there's a couple other programs in the chat. I'm trying to look and see if you got them listed. Okay. So I think there are things are happening, and there is a new co-production at UAF through the study of Arctic change, and it's called the Search Program. That is looking at a co-production of knowledge, and they're looking for folks to participate on these advisory committees, and certainly like looking at how we share that knowledge and create those pathways is something that we all have to do. We all have to be better at.
Jackie, could you put information about that in the chat that I can copy onto here?
Sure, I'll put that in there.
And I noticed that this one does not have a lead. And so I'm wondering if this is something that, is there some department or entity in the region that wants to kind of, like be a central place for connecting people with these resources? Is there something like that that already exists?
We also have a comment from Jennifer in the chat. UAF TCC has been working on developing trainings that help prepare people to engage at the state and federal regulatory process. Like George had mentioned earlier, I want to think they also have started working on rural tribal management programs. I think you're right. I think I did see something where they are looking at that. I know UAF was looking at, because most of our small tribes have capacity issues. There just aren't enough people to build capacity. And so how do we create a training program that really is catered to rural communities? If you have thoughts on that, certainly if you have connections at APU or UAF in rural development, those kind of conversations lead to the creation of criteria and curriculum that really does help our tribes. Right now, they're all siloed. You have to learn everything individually. And I know for like some of the housing directors in our smaller villages, just learning the process of NAHASDA and HUD funding for housing is way overwhelming. So looking at how you kind of alleviate that stress of multiple programs being learned. All right, so here we go. We're trying to identify a lead. Is there anyone, or does anyone have any suggestions? This is where you get to voluntold somebody, right? Like, hey, they're a really good one for this, and they're not here to say no. So, does anyone have any ideas on a lead for this career pathway for subsistence and natural resource management? Is there someone that maybe teaches a program or works in the arena that could kind of guide the process?
Hey everyone. I have been learning so much just listening. So thanks everyone for their good comments. And so a couple of belated things that I just wanted to say, regarding the prior discussion about the salmon crash. Thank you to Chief Williams and the Yukon River Intertribal Fish Commission for all their good work. Because I've seen, the talking points through, I participate in the First Alaskans Protecting Our Ways of Life working group. And that was just the comment that I had here was maybe if we haven't already, it might be worth, and I'm happy to ask the group and then report back at our next, the next time we have the chance to talk, that they might have a good recommendation, because there are a lot of good minds on that call too. Thank you.
Thanks, Miranda. Yeah, this is exactly what we need to do is we all participate in different groups and maybe we even collaborate together, but are there those threads, right, that we could connect and say, oh, well, this group might have somebody or even be able to help with this. So, all right, so we're going to move down unless anyone has anything else. We're going to move on to the next.
George is raising his hand
Go,
for a while
go
now.
ahead. Oh, sorry, George, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure if this belongs in this section or the next one, but as an example for having youth get more involved in these sorts of programs, we went after U.S. Fish and Wildlife has a grant program every 2 years, FRMP, which is Fishery Resource Monitoring. And I think the YK Delta might be a perfect example of this. What we're encouraging is hiring a youth within that program that is interested in the area and the science gathering part of it to kind of bridge the gap. There's a lot of distrust between our local communities and these external entities, whether it be state or federally run. But having a youth involved, throughout the summer, being involved in escapement enumeration or escapement quality, it helps. Well, the hope is that it will help the buy-in of people saying, oh yeah, that's so-and-so's, son or daughter that participated in this, and they're trusted family. And yeah, I believe I'm going to start trusting some of these numbers they're giving us. So I just thought maybe getting them involved in internships locally will help a lot. So thank you for letting me share.
Thanks, George. I think that's really, oops, now it's saying my internet's unstable, so I'm going to turn my video off. I think you could add that funding resource, Heather, to that U.S. Fish and Wildlife. If I heard George correctly, he said there is a grant to pay for an intern. And that is something that they're doing, and that certainly this group could look at doing.
And that's a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service grant.
Yeah. Is that
Yeah.
correct, George?
Yes, it's available every 2 years. I'm not sure what cycle the YK Delta is on, but ours is for our Chignik region is up this year. So I think we'll be looking at funding this year. So, but it's never too early to start the talk with U.S. Fish and Wildlife people about this and attending, of course, those RAC meetings that are mentioned here. So thank you.
Thanks, George. I think it's really important just to hear the common thread is that our voices need to be at the table. We need to build a resilient future with our youth and regain this collaboration and trust. There still is that trust issue is a hard one because it really comes down to equality, and are our voices valued as much as, and I don't know that we're there or we're going to be there anytime soon, but I think having our voices there is important because it's shifting. The dialogue is shifting. So I encourage everyone to really participate in those conversations. We have a comment from Clarence for section H. As we heard from our keynote, ANSEP is doing this successfully. Something else ANSEP has done is partnering with LKSD and KUC to open an accelerated high school for LKSD students. And they are taking dual credit classes and are on track to get their bachelor's degree a year after they graduate from high school. LKSD and ANSEP are funding it. So there's another program there that is a great example of this. The nice thing too is that we're starting to see that some of these instructors are our own people. And that's really what we want to see. So there is another comment from Krista. Native Youth Climate Adaptation Leadership Congress is, Leadership Congress is an annual youth program that is a collaborative program run by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, National Park Service, BIA, and U.S. Forest Service. This is a good national mentorship program for youth, and she put the link in there, Heather, if you want to share that with everyone. Thanks, Krista. And really, you know, this working group, I think what we could do, if anything, the takeaway today is to go beyond looking at siloed institution, which is something that's very natural to the Western flow of things, and really pushing and like creating more of a river flow of water, right? So that we have all of these connections. So there's multiple ways of doing it, whether you're going to go around the rock on the right or around the rock on the left. There is a flow of information there. Okay. No hands up. If you think of something that kind of is not for the sector we're in, certainly just either pop it in the chat and we'll move up, just like Clarence did for section H. If you find something else that fits into another section, feel free to pop it into the chat or raise your hand, and we're more than happy to pause and give you that space to talk. All right, Heather. Next is establish a collective impact initiative. Set a goal to develop a certain number of resource managers or scientists from the YK region to work in the region. Name that number and pull all entities together to align their efforts to achieve the goal by linking and leveraging educational opportunities, internships, employment opportunities, etc. This one still doesn't have a lead. If there's anyone that wants to take the lead on this initiative, certainly feel free to pop your name in the chat or volunteer someone who you think would be great. Or
I
if
think
you're,
we might actually be able to, oh, Krista, oh, good. Krista raised her hand.
oh, okay.
I actually, Freddie and I worked with Melinda Chase earlier this year on a concept paper that tried to articulate this a little bit more and reach out to some people. And I believe that Krista might be able to speak a little bit about that as well on Melinda's behalf.
Yeah, thanks for that. I did want to just mention that that was an initiative that Melinda did initiate conversation with folks at Acknowledgement, Heather. And I think where it stands now is a draft concept paper is in the works. I think there's still some work that needs to be done. Sort of the direction that Melinda initially envisioned was really thinking about some of the work that is going on along the lines of coastal erosion and some of the state programs that are working with tribes on that front, and really thinking about connecting that to students within the UAF or UAA system that are pursuing their degree programs within that scope of work, and really trying to connect the dots so that there's capacity being built among
Did we lose Krista?
Yes, my internet is not super stable today, but connecting between upcoming youth leaders, state programs, as well as the regional tribal organizations such as ABCP. So that's my update from not being directly involved with formulating the paper that's in the works, but I do know that that Melinda and folks at Acknowledgement have been working on that front.
Okay. Heather, do you see all the activity in the chat? And then because I can't look at the full screen, I just want to be aware of the time.
Yes.
Okay.
Wow.
So there's a couple things. Miranda also wanted to talk about the Yukon River Salmon Disaster Declaration efforts. I don't know where that fits into this conversation, but certainly let's leave space for that. Clarence has in the chat, pursue climate change careers too, so that we could better incorporate Indigenous knowledge into Western science. I totally agree with you, Clarence. I mean, climate change has kind of become my world, but we have to remember that our ancestors have lived on the same geographic lands for thousands and thousands of years. So there is the Indigenous knowledge piece that really was kind of discarded or not referenced throughout Western science. And I like to remind people that even in our region, the Nana region, our Indigenous people have been there for scientifically proven for over 17,000 years. And Western science is merely 150 years old. So when you compare in time frame, there is so much more. It's just a sliver in time. So the Indigenous knowledge piece has to be part of, to me, all the conversations at every place. So Heather, I just want to reference back to Miranda's comment about the Yukon River Salmon Disaster Declaration. And I don't know how much more we have here.
So we have one more of the action plan tab.
Okay. So let's do that. Okay, let's do that. And then we could.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Miranda, if in the chat, George is giving you some information to contact him. Oh, there you go. Okay, so you guys could connect. So let's go over this last one, and then we'll leave space for that conversation. We do have about 20 minutes. And I don't see any hands up. So the next one is to establish a small cohort of youth who can be mentored and introduced to the educational and career pathways in natural resources. ANSEP is doing that. First Alaskan Institute has lots of, I would add ICC here. There are a lot of programs that allow for not only mentorship, but fellowship and internship. ANTHC has lots of internships available throughout the organization. You know, and ANTHC covers everything from water and sanitation to climate change, which also includes food security to, and it's all intertwined because our communities need all those aspects. So trying to think of other organizations that at the state or federal level that have those internships. And I would encourage other organizations like the Bering Sea fisheries groups and you know, there's funding out there to incorporate internships and mentoring into organizations for specific sectors, whether it be fisheries or management or so I encourage you to look outside the box. If your organization doesn't have the funding, there might be a grant in Fish and Wildlife or fisheries that you could get, just like George said, and utilize that funding to create that program. Okay, so Miranda has, do you want to share now, Miranda?
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay,
So
all right.
I don't have complete numbers, but Tisha looked into it and she has the number of scholarships that were awarded for natural resources specifically. And that came to 362 roughly over the last, was that 5 years about? So I have individual breakdowns per year, but I don't have the total dollar amount. So it sounds like those numbers are still evolving, but wanted to share that as an update since she had a scheduling conflict that came up. But she'll be back later.
Okay, where is that?
I wasn't able to find it. She said that there was she said one of the last bullets she thought had information on scholarships. So wanted to kick that out for the group in case it's helpful.
Okay, I might just put it here. Okay, and then maybe we'll follow up with her after and check on that. And you wanted to talk about the fisheries disaster declaration.
Yeah, if there's time and if there's interest. So the disaster declaration efforts, I know that a lot of people have been working on this, and I think, was it Chief Williams who mentioned it in this conversation earlier? Or maybe it was someone else who touched on it. But of course, you know, with the really devastatingly low salmon runs, you know, last year, and then it got even worse this year with, you know, 100,000 where it would usually be 1 million fall chum going by the counter. It's just devastating. And there's 2 pending disaster declaration requests on the NOAA website from Governor Dunleavy, and I know ABCP has advocated. I know AFN signed a letter. I believe Cohort did as well. And of course, all of the good work from the Yukon River Intertribal Fish Commission and a whole cohort of folks have been working on this. But I wanted to see if, you know, there are any specific things that I can assist with on there, opportunities to collaborate. The Chillista board just passed a resolution this week in support of the federal disaster declaration. And as a follow-up, I've been talking with the state, and we'll be trying to, lean on the Alaska congressional delegation to support and try to get the Secretary of Commerce, Secretary Raimundo, to actually grant that disaster declaration. And if that's granted, and if the state, if Congress appropriates the funds and then kicks it back over to the state to distribute those funds and create programs for those funds, I'm interested, and I've started drafting a letter. So if people would like to co-sign or look at it, please let me know. Because I'd like to just stake out, for the state at this stage, because hopefully those funds will materialize, that they should be utilized, for research, which is incredibly important, but also for subsistence users. So it's not just the commercial fishing interests that benefit from those funding dollars that will hopefully materialize soon. But it's really mysterious to me. They have all of the data from the state, from the commercial fisheries for 2020 and 2021. So I hope that they move swifter than they have been. But unfortunately, with the federal government, swift doesn't really seem to be the pace that they're responding to really urgent situations. So thank you. And again, look forward to talking with George. And if anybody else has any information on how I can help support those efforts, would love to learn more. Thanks.
Thank you, Miranda. I think that's really important. George, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I look forward to talking with Miranda a little further. We've, our first disaster declaration was in August of 2018. We still haven't seen an application for relief for subsistence or commercial. The hang up is not in Washington, D.C. It's after it gets back to the state of Alaska. And I can talk about that with you a little bit more. What I would like to see we had another disaster in 2020, and then our Lake and Peninsula Borough just put in a request for disaster for 21. What I would like to see is AFN pass a resolution helping all Alaska tribes in this process as, climate change is happening, food security is being disrupted. More and more areas of the state are going to be facing this grueling process. We need to get relief out to our people faster. There's no reason it should take 3 years for our people. They have boat and permit payments, utility, on and on and on. The process is too slow. So anyways, we need to unite and see if we can get some action. And I do have a few letters I will share with you, Miranda. If you send me an email, I'll do that. You can share that with this group. So thank you for the opportunity to speak again.
Thanks, George. And I appreciate all your input, because you're right. I mean, really, this we're looking at the YK right now, but it is going to ripple out into all of our tribes, and they're going to be affected. So if we could change the process, or find ways to unite, to not have to make it this slow process every time or reinvent the wheel. It really is good for us to look at organizations like AFN to kind of band together to create a more unified voice. We have another. So AFN did write a letter with ABCP. That sounds like a great way to start that. Miranda, thanks. Also, there's a bill pending in the House right now to improve the process. I think we're working with a different administration. We need to take advantage of that right now. We have on many levels an administration in Washington, D.C. that is listening. So I highly encourage everyone to utilize your voice and value it, and speak on behalf of your ancestors that prayed for you to be at these spaces, and for the future, which are our youth that are watching everything we do and hearing everything we say. So thank you, Miranda and George, for that input. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add to the conversation?
Yeah,
just wanted-
Stephen Alexi here.
Okay, Stephen, go
Um,
ahead.
I'm happy you said that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, because there are documents out there from the early 90s to the late 90s when the previous leaders that have passed on have dealt with this particular issue where when they thought the fish that are returning to these areas were being intercepted by Area M commercial fishermen. So, there have been studies already, and at the end, if they were going to be like a disastrous year we had this year, what they should have done was have at least 500,000 fish pass before they opened for commercial fishermen. And I was glad that George had brought up this particular issue from his younger days. I might have been in my early to late teens, but I do remember people like Chuck Chalak from Nunapichuk traveling out to lobby against these type of situations we had. So I just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. And that's just that in itself, that testimony that he was a teen, he saw it happening, and now he's in that seat. For the youth listening and participating, this is exactly what we talk about when we want to see the next flow of leadership kind of come into our shoes. And certainly I appreciate when I hear stuff like that, stories like Stephen's, where he remembers as a teenager, folks going out and remembering their names. That's something that I think too is very important. They were our first advocates. All right, so let's see. We have something else in the chat. If you could post it. Clarence says we have a UPIC climate worker in the White House. We have, we have some amazing local folks in the White House right now and at the national level. Joy Millett says, was just in a meeting with FEMA, and my understanding was that tribes could work directly with FEMA and not go through the state. I may have misunderstood the presentation. So the FEMA tribal liaison is being posted by Heather. And so I think that, I think what we need to do is, I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding. Processes that are changed, I think a lot of them just need to be deconstructed and reconstructed with Indigenous lens. I don't know that that's going to happen right away, but I think interacting with at the national level and at the state level, I think the state is kind of our hiccup right now. Seems like things get clogged up right there and not get to tribes. So remember that when you participated in the voting process, you have those rights to make sure your voice is heard. Okay, so we're about ready to wrap it up, and I just want to make sure I leave space for anyone else that wants to add to this.
Could I add something real quick? This is John.
Sure. Okay.
Heather, could you scroll up to the building a cohort bullet?
This one?
Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. At TKC, we haven't been able to host our normal internship program for a couple of years due to COVID and traveling and, in and out of communities and whatnot. But what we work into our internship program is an overview and learning of subsistence advocacy, and then having our interns participate in any of the meetings that are going on, in the region and on the river. So I know that a lot of people here have organizations that have internships already, and you can just, we don't have to create new ones. We can build this stuff into existing, internships. And then several people mentioned DMUMPTA, the program that UAF is piloting, and they're building a strong cohort of fisheries masters or PhD students coming from an Indigenous lens. And the whole point of that is to, well, I think the bottom line goal is systems change, but bringing that Indigenous knowledge to all of these arenas, largely, and in the case of DMUMPTA, all from Indigenous people. So 4 of the cohort members, I think there's 9 of them this year, have ties to the Yukon and Kuskokwim already, so that's exciting. And then my last note on this is when we think of youth, what I had to learn was from an Indigenous perspective, youth or young people doesn't mean children necessarily. It's those graduating or fresh out of high school and early 20s people who are still young and learning, but really eager. So I think there's, keep that in mind when we're talking about youth, and then encourage them to get involved in any opportunities to serve on as a youth seat, or sometimes as a regular seat. That's it. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I really think too, like that's a great reminder that COVID has created this opportunity to listen in on meetings that we normally can't listen in on. So I encourage you to share your meeting Zoom links with folks and with the youth. And I agree. We kind of get stuck on calendars, but if you look at the calendar, our seasons are way beyond 4 seasons. And thank you, Mike, for participating. He has to hop off. And thank you, everyone, for your comments. Rebecca, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Very just so rewarding to be involved in these conversations. I work for Donlin Gold and Community Relations, and I just we're here to engage in conversation with all of the groups involved in these important efforts. I myself sit on the Western Interior RAC, and that's an advisory committee to the Federal Subsistence Board, as many of you probably know. And I also sit on the Central Kuskokwim Advisory Committee, and that's advises the State Board of Fish and Game. Want to be involved. We're always committed to open and two-way communication, especially around the topic of subsistence and food security. And I wanted to put a plug in for the Subsistence Community Advisory Committee that we're currently standing up with our partners, TKC and Chalista. This committee focuses on the relationship between the Donlin Gold Project and subsistence activities within the Kuskokwim River drainage. So we're actively recruiting for that committee, and I'll put a link in the chat so that anyone who's interested can go to that and learn more. I know there are a lot of committees out there and that people are busy, but we're really excited about this and hoping to get people from the region involved and put in an application. So pass.
Did we just lose audio?
Heather, we have Rebecca is muted. Rebecca, somehow you got muted.
Sorry, did you guys did you hear everything that I said? Sorry, my internet's terrible. I live in Red Devil. I'm not sure what all that you heard, but I'm gonna put a link in the chat for everyone to go and read about our Subsistence Community Advisory Committee with the partners TKC and Chalista. We're in the process of recruiting for that, and it's a great way for folks to get involved.
Okay, thank you. Yes, go ahead and put it in the chat. And I think we caught almost everything you said. And I appreciate that, Rebecca. You know, the sharing is vital. So we're just about on our 12 o'clock hour. I wanted to see, we need to schedule the next meeting. And is this quarterly, Heather, normally, or?
I think it's when, as often as this group wants to meet. So I think, you know, it's up to the members. And I would ask that If anyone on the group right now has a general sense of when might be a good time to think about that, we can continue to follow up. Because I know there are probably some people who are not on the call right now who would want to weigh in on their availability, but did anyone, Jennifer, Clarence, did anybody have a sense of when this group might meet again?
This is Jennifer. I am not sure. I don't recall what our, sort of our follow-up schedule was like after the last one. If there really even was sort of a formal reconvening of the group. So I would, I don't know if people have, recommendations.
This is Clarence. I think last year there were some follow-ups in late December, early January. I'm not sure if Subsistence work group was one of them, but if we have a good list of things, maybe we could do a survey monkey to everyone to see their availability or when they would like to see a meeting done. But I think I would recommend that we break up some of these things. Like if you scroll up, I think there's some indicators and things like that we need to that we might want to look at.
Yeah.
To help evaluate, so the CEDS committee can really help evaluate, these strategies. That's the purpose of the CEDS, is so that the CEDS committee could evaluate the strategies, and we could work on, okay, what are the indicators, what's the data that we can use to measure these indicators, so that the CEDS committee could really, do the evaluations on the strategies. So that's my input.
Thanks, Clarence. I think that's a great idea to really create focus groups, and then your goals could be met. To me, that is something that in planning, sometimes it gets a little all mushed together. And so it becomes just extended conversations versus a strategy that it has implementing goals. Heather, I guess I'm done here. I'm going to pass it over to you. And I just want to say Kayanak, everybody, for allowing me to come into your space. I really do appreciate this conversation. It was very rich and informative. And you just have a wonderful, wonderful day. And I will see you next time.
Okay, thank you, Kayanak. I have been taking notes. We will send out back to the group and we'll start thinking about some next steps. So thank you everyone for everything that you've shared and for being part of today's discussion. And with that, we'll have a wonderful lunch.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.